think a lot of times you accept one limitation and just don't go past to see if you can overcome it. And I think with the CF line, we really pushed hard to ensure that we achieved the performance we expected.
I would say sometimes, not always, but the product development may start with a kind of an architectural concept of what you're trying to develop. But in this case, the goal was to really target some very specific application scenarios that then drove very specific dimensional requirements. So we kind of started with understanding what are the envelopes we're trying to fit things within, and then what is the kind of extreme performance level we're trying to achieve. And then the team was tasked with figuring out how to get there within those constraints.
The CF series was really designed to bring the entire application range into the Cohesion product family.
Claire really comes from a touring lineage, but now we're covering a wide range of special events and distributed events that really require a larger selection of products that offer unique and new capabilities.
All of the new Cohesion products we're making are things we're making to expand the product line to offer a full palette of speakers that come from the same lineage, and that means with respect to the attention to detail in material choice, in cabinet construction, in the acoustic design of the low frequency.
Taking the technology that already existed in the bigger products and shrinking it was certainly a goal of ours, while playing to the trade-offs of making it smaller. So component choices that we had, we stuck with many of the same families, the same topologies that we had used in the larger versions.
When you don't take those things into consideration, it just becomes harder for the designers to try to figure out how they're going to use those boxes and where they need to place them. So we just designed the boxes to be as small as possible with the highest output, so that they're the most usable in the most situations.
No one ever goes into an experiential event or an installation and says, that speaker's too small, I want to see more of it. Speakers, in a lot of cases, are explicitly to be heard and not seen. Of course, there are manufacturers out there that make speakers that are really, really small and really able to be integrated into anything pretty much in an invisible fashion. But those don't offer the performance that's needed for many live events.
One of the things that comes along with that smaller size is the difficulty in getting more output out of it. So that's a part of the design, always looking at the latest technologies and figuring out how you can shrink the box without shrinking the performance.
In, I guess, imagining the CF product line holistically, one of the challenges was to make sure that we had enough diversity among the models, that we really covered all of the applications that we were targeting. But of course, that leads to the temptation to perhaps develop a lot of products. So the challenge for the team was to figure out what is that right balance, where we knew that every product was a unique thing that had an obvious place and was capable of doing things that the others couldn't, but not going too far to make things really complicated logistically for the touring organization.
CF24 is a extremely small speaker cabinet that was designed to fit in confined spaces. We're trying to make something that fits in both a shallow depth and a narrow height. There are a lot of places in theaters or churches in particular where fill speakers need to be to cover a seat that might be shadowed by some architectural feature or simply very close to a stage or staircase, and trying to fit a speaker there to add seamless coverage with the rest of the system is important, but often nobody wants to see it. So in some cases, these can be surface mounted and it's visually discrete when surface mounted, but it also will fit both in the depth of a stud wall or in the height of a stair riser, which really restricts the acoustic design of the cabinet. So it's very challenging to maximize the output and bandwidth in such a small cabinet volume. There was a lot that we had to do to stretch that to the bounds of the limits within that space.
Well, speaker design is all about compromises, and as you make a speaker smaller, you lose air volume, and air volume is required to get good low frequency performance. So as they get smaller, the low frequency performance tends to go away, and the sound quality and headroom of the speaker can suffer in that case. In the case of the CF24, a primary directive was to fit inside of a wall stud, so that really limited how much enclosure volume we had to work with. And that just becomes a sort of a challenging exercise to get a usable amount of low frequency out of it. It's not a subwoofer, it doesn't need to go all the way down and shake everything, but it needs to go low enough for things like voices and acoustic instruments to sound natural. The same is for high frequency. As devices get smaller, the horns and the high frequency producers get smaller, and the pattern control becomes a little bit more difficult to achieve in some cases. So getting a smooth coverage over the desired coverage area in a small enclosure is just something that needs to be considered and carefully engineered.
Took a lot of iteration to kind of arrive on that perfect balance of bandwidth versus size. So there was a lot of back and forth. Of course, on the acoustic side, we always want it bigger, but having that restriction really kind of forced us to be creative in our solutions.
The CF28 is a larger format member of the CF series that is a 888 with a central horn, with a rotatable horn.
It could be used as a main in a distributed system, as an under balcony product, but first and foremost, it was imagined as a very high output front fill. And the need for that was really driven by close connectivity to core users, really in the touring space. So the objective here was to make something that really isn't that much larger than a CP6, but is just as capable of the output of a small format line array, but with the directivity and the dimensions and the handling characteristics that you would expect from a front fill.
The CP6 has performed really well. It's a real high-performing, low-profile front fill, but in some applications, the output wasn't enough per se. So we were kind of looking for what was the minimum change we could make to actually get the bandwidth and output that people were requesting. So I think with the CF28, we were able to achieve a small increase in height and really a large jump in performance.
CF10 and CF14 are related topologies. They're both coaxial, multi-purpose speakers. It can be used generally as a fill or a stage monitor, mounted on a bracket or on a pole. So it's something that can be used for a variety of applications. By being coaxial, it is compact in size. There's not extra space above a woofer, for example, for the horn. So it retains compact size, concentric audio output, and symmetric sound field. And in both cases, the woofer and horn are together rotatable to change the pattern depending if you use it on a pole, on a wall bracket, or on a stage.
Well, the CF10 and CF14 use the same technology that's in our existing CM14 wedge monitor. The CM14 was designed specifically to sit on a stage, aiming up at an artist. So its profile, the size of the cabinet, and the shape of it was dedicated to that specific orientation. When we're looking at a fill speaker, we need it to be more flexible. And so the CF14 essentially takes the foundation of the CM14, and the cabinet is slightly morphed to be more flexible in application. It can sit up on end, it can sit on the side. And then the CF10 was a natural topology to shrink down, to take what already existed in the 14-inch size coax and shrink it down into a 10-inch size cabinet with the performance of, say, a 12-inch, something that would be expected to be a little bit bigger. We were able to get that down into a 10-inch size and therefore a slightly smaller box. It has I mean, when you look at the CF10 and CF14 next to each other, they basically look the same. They're just, CF10 is just a little bit smaller. And the technology that went into it is fundamentally the same. The high frequency component is the same as in both of them, so that they voice the same. Obviously, with the CF10 being a smaller box, smaller size transducer, it can't go as low in frequency, and that's always the limitation that you have with any size box that you choose. But otherwise, the CF10 fundamentally is just a shrunk down CF14.
The CF10 is literally designed to just be large enough to hold the 10-inch component. So we didn't leave a whole lot of extra space in that one, and we're able to get good performance out of a smaller enclosure.
We're hyper-focused on the actual usability of the product because our colleagues are the ones using it. We have direct feedback from how well the product actually functions in the field.
We're developing products like the CF family for the best production professionals in the world, and I think we take that responsibility seriously. We owe it to them to ensure that really everything about the product, not only its performance capabilities in an acoustical sense, but also, I guess I'd say, handling dynamics and how easy it is to deploy or to strike. All of those things are done with professionals in mind and with a profound understanding of kind of what a day in the life is like. So we really make sure that we carefully kind of target their expectations when we develop products like this.